Carlee's 911 call remains the only report of a child on the interstate, despite numerous vehicles passing through the area at that time. No one has called to report that a child is missing, and the Hoover Police Department did not locate any evidence of a small child walking down the interstate.
Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim, here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
Doing pretty good today, Tim. Not quite as fantastic as I'm usually doing, because what we're about to talk about is kind of confusing, kind of perplexed me, kind of definitely perplexed you, and as it all unfolded, we knew that we had to talk about it, and even leading up to this, with all of the material that is out there and what we're working on, I still don't even know really how to approach this. But anyway, I do know how to approach asking you how you are today, which is simply saying, how are you today, Tim?
I am doing well. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about Carlee Russell and her brief disappearance. This is a case that has captured the media's attention, the true crime community's attention, and obviously the attention of authorities. And it is a story that's still developing. So as we sit here right now, we are recording this on Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. Very good chance that there are more developments that happen this week. And this episode will be released on Thursday, July 27th of this week. So there's a chance we may not get to all of the developments, but we will do our best. But before we get too deep into this case, we need to tell you about Missing Premium. You can now subscribe to Missing Premium on Apple Podcasts, but if you're not an Apple user, you can go to missing.supportingcast.fm and get ad-free episodes, early releases, and our weekly bonus show where we discuss our opinions on recent happenings in the true crime community and behind-the-scenes life here at Crawlspace Media. It's only $4.99 a month, and in addition to all that, you get ad-free and early episodes of Crawlspace and the new hit series from Crawlspace Media called Dark Valley.
And speaking of Dark Valley, Tim, there will be an interlude episode this Friday, the 28th, that's going to be released, and you and I join Jennifer Amell, and we bring everything up to current. All of the cases, all of the stories, all of the victims, everything that's happened through episodes 1 to 7 in Dark Valley. We're going to recap and go back through some of those details, but then fill in a little bit of these developments and updates that have happened in the meantime. While this series has been released, some new developments have come across our desk, so we're going to fill people in on that. And then the following week, August 4th, we will resume the series with episode 8 all the way up to 12. Just want to thank everybody who's listened, supported it, and rated it and reviewed it. If you haven't, please do so. It really, truly goes a long way.
All right, so follow us at Missing CSM on social media, and we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our discussion on the mysterious case of Carlee Russell. So Carlee Russell is a 25-year-old black woman in Alabama who attends Jeff State, where she is studying to become a registered nurse. And she has a bachelor's degree in psychology, and she worked at Woodhouse Spa, Birmingham.
And in light of the developments that have happened over the past 24 hours, it really speaks volumes to me that she has a bachelor's degree in psychology, which is really fascinating that this whole thing played out. It wouldn't have been so impactful to me if she had a degree in accounting or something like that. But psychology really is, I don't know at this point how important, but I feel like is pretty important to her story. And basically the story begins on July 13th of this year, 2023. Carlee had left work around 8:20 p.m. She went by a restaurant named Taziki's to pick up some takeout food, then went to Target and bought some items that included some snacks.
And then while driving on I-459 in Hoover, Alabama, Carlee pulled her red Mercedes over and called 911 to report a child walking in the road. And again, that's the interstate. And so there's surveillance video of Carlee at this exact moment that you can check out if you'd like. There is a link in the show notes, but we're going to describe it a little bit. So Carlee is seen pulling to the shoulder on the pretty busy interstate, and there are cars passing as she pulls into the breakdown lane with her emergency lights on. She slows her car down to what looks like about 20 miles per hour or possibly less as she cruises in the breakdown lane, and she finally comes to a complete stop. Then she appears to exit the driver's side of the vehicle and walk around the car. The passenger's side door opens here too, and it appears as if Carlee is standing next to the passenger's side door of the car. And while this is happening, there are many cars and trucks that pass by. I counted around 55 vehicles that pass by during these 3 minutes that are shown in the surveillance video.
And like you mentioned, we do have the links in the show notes of the surveillance video of Carlee pulling her car over. And you referenced the 911 call, and that could be also accessed in the show notes as well, the link to that. And we're going to reference the press conference as well, where they play this for the press. And my first impression of her tone was that she sounded really calm. And when the listeners listen to it, I'm curious to hear what they think, but we'll go over it here.
Yeah, I do agree with her tone. It doesn't seem like it would fit the situation. So we're going to play the 911 call right here.
911, where's your emergency?
Hi, I am on Interstate 459, and there is a kid just walking by themselves.
Oh, hold on. Where on 459 are you?
I'm right next to the exit 10 by the Hoover Met, like to get off by the Hoover Met.
Okay, so you're before that exit?
Yes.
Okay, and were you headed southbound or northbound? Like toward Tuscaloosa or toward 280?
Towards Tuscaloosa.
Okay, and was the child on the left or right side?
On the right side.
Were they walking northbound or southbound?
They're walking towards Tuscaloosa.
Walking southbound? Or how old do they look?
Like a toddler, like maybe like 3 or 4.
Did you pull over with them? Are you still with them?
Yes.
Okay, are you with the child right now?
No, I'm not. I didn't get out of the car. I can see them though.
Do you mind staying and keeping an eye on them until we get there?
Yeah, okay. Sure, yeah.
Okay, what kind of car are you in?
I'm in a red Mercedes-Benz.
Is that a sedan or SUV?
SUV. I mean, it's a sedan. Sorry.
Can you put your hazards on for me?
Yeah, they're on.
Okay. Did you talk to the child at all, or did you say anything to them?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do they look like they're injured?
No, they don't.
Are they white, black, Hispanic, or Asian?
They're white.
Okay. Is it male or female?
I think it's a boy, a little boy.
White male? Okay. Is he wearing clothes?
Yes.
Okay. What is he wearing?
It's a white T-shirt, and it doesn't look like he has any pants on. It looks like a diaper.
And you don't see any cars anywhere?
No cars are anywhere.
Okay. All right. What's your name?
My name is Carlee Russell.
And you don't see any injuries on the child from where you're at, correct?
No, but I can't really see them that good.
Okay, try to keep an eye on them for the best that you can, because I don't want you to lose track of them.
Okay.
All right, and do they have shoes on?
No.
No shoes?
Not that I can see. I can't really see that well.
Okay. All right. I've got them on the way, okay? Just try to keep an eye on them, but officers are on the way, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
And she's talking about this toddler. She says maybe 3 or 4 years old, and they're walking towards Tuscaloosa, walking southbound on the interstate. Sounds like a wild story, but one of the reasons I mentioned how many cars passed by is because no one else saw a toddler. There were no other calls.
What does it say to you that she actually pulled the car over? That she went through the motions of this? Like, did she know that there was a security camera?
Good question. The security video, the surveillance video, is not great quality, and it seems like it's from like a highway overpass or something like that, because it's pretty high up. Maybe it's on a highway light or something. I'm not quite sure, but I don't know if she would have known that she'd be on camera, because I feel like she might have acted a little differently or told a different story afterwards if she knew she was going to be on camera. Because really what she's saying in the 911 call is not what the video shows. And she says she doesn't see any cars anywhere. Like, I mean, that's kind of a weird part. The 911 operator asks her, do you see any cars anywhere? And I think she means that this toddler came out of, but Carlee says, no cars anywhere. And that's like not even close to true. And then after Carlee hung up, she called a family member, and the family member reported that she, quote, lost contact with her, end quote, during the call, even though, quote, the line remained open, end quote. And from AL.com, who got a little deeper into this, there's a quote from Talitha Russell, who is Carlee's mom, saying, my son's girlfriend heard Carlee asking the child, are you okay? She never heard the child say anything, but then she heard our daughter scream. From there, all you hear on her phone is background noise from the interstate.
So according to her story and this account, Carlee would have gone missing somewhere during that or right after that phone call, around 9:36 p.m. The scream happened, the line stayed open, which means it just didn't hang up, correct? Like, I didn't misunderstand that. That just was an open
correct.
line. And so that was an open line, and everything that was heard on that line was interstate traffic noise, essentially. And the police arrived about 3 minutes after Carlee was gone. So about 3 minutes after that scream, the line's open, that time passes, police show up.
Right.
Where they find her car, but not Carlee. What was the state of the car? Was the engine running? Was it running? Did it still have its hazards on? What do we know about this?
Yeah, so the engine was still running. Her car door was open, and they found Carlee's phone on the ground, along with her wig and her hat. And apparently her purse was still in the car, along with her Apple Watch and AirPods that were in her purse. So that's a lot of sort of equipment and things that you need on a day-to-day basis to get around town. I mean, including the car. Obviously, that's one of the biggest clues. The car was abandoned.
It does seem, at first glance, if you don't have the context, that someone was abducted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so Talitha Russell, Carlee's mom, also told this news outlet that a trucker traveling on I-459 at the time of Carlee's disappearance called in a tip. And she said he saw her red car with the door open, and he saw a gray car with a tan, brown-skinned man with khaki shorts on leaning over in the car. And that's a direct quote from Talitha. So I haven't heard that call, but apparently that was a call that happened.
Which is really interesting to me, that a call happens for a car that's on the side of the road when no calls happen for a toddler reported on the side of the road, except for one. And this tall, brown-skinned man with khaki shorts on could have been another pedestrian, another commuter who had seen the car and pulled over to see what was going on. But, again, on the surface, it starts to come together in a very nefarious way.
Yeah, it could be. And, I mean, that could also be Carlee, too, if she's not wearing her wig.
That's a great point. And you're going by at a certain mile per hour?
Yeah. And that part actually kind of reminds me a lot of Brandon Lawson's case, because there was a trucker who called 911 when his car was abandoned on the side of the road. So maybe that's just something that truckers do for safety.
I was just going to say that, because I was going to ask you, when was the last time you called 911 for a car on the side of the road?
Never.
But as a trucker, as someone who lives their life on the interstates, I'm sure that is like almost like ingrained in them to call, A, because they want to make sure that the person's safe, but B, probably almost like a A1, A2, they want to make sure no other trucker hits this car. I mean, if
Yeah.
someone has a blowout or something, like it's still a dangerous obstacle, even if it's on the side of the road. So that's a great point. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't know where the gray car comes from, though, that was apparently near the red Mercedes. And Talitha goes on to say the police did find some tire tracks in the grass. They said because it was not a muddy area, they were not able to determine what type of vehicle it could have been. And as you mentioned, this is sort of set up to be an abduction. With maybe the strangeness of the cars driving by, you would think someone would have seen maybe an actual abduction the moment she screamed. If there was some violent act or something like that, you would think there would have been some eyewitness. Doesn't mean the eyewitness makes a call or knows what they saw, but...
Again, we are trying to figure this out in real time as we're looking at all of the material, and knowing the developments that have happened in the past 24 hours, certain things do start to piece together, but in a very circumstantial / we don't want to speculate too much way. Like an additional car now at the scene with an additional person possibly at the scene. It's pretty obvious where one would start to speculate with those factors coupled with the new developments.
Right. And it made news right away. And so this was kind of a viral story right away on social media and other sites. And of course, at this time, there was a frantic 2-day statewide search for Carlee that authorities ran. And it really captured international news, but yielded 0 results. But again, you can imagine all the conspiracy theories that spread online. It just seemed like the perfect storm for this kind of speculation, rumors, and misinfo.
And then about 48 hours after she went missing, Carlee appeared at her home on foot at 10:44 p.m. on Saturday, July 15th, 2023. So just about 2 days after her disappearance, she reemerged, and clearly this leads to a lot of questions. The family called police, who called off their search and sent for an ambulance.
Yeah, and this is a weird part because the call was apparently for an unresponsive but breathing person. But then when the ambulance arrived, Carlee was awake and speaking. So I'm not really sure where that quote, unresponsive but breathing, came from or why.
I can see that. I could see Carlee or anybody who went through a traumatic event showing up and not saying anything and having frantic parents asking questions in a rapid fire manner and calling 911, and the 911 operator will say, is the person responsive? Is the person conscious? And they'll say, yes. Is she responsive? Well, she hasn't said anything to us yet. So they type in unresponsive, and then by the time the ambulance shows up, she's had a second to start to work herself into the conversation with her parents, and she's starting to become a little bit more alert. I could see where that would be weird, but reasonable.
And after Carlee was treated, she spoke with investigators and told them one hell of a story. Investigators observed an injury to Carlee's lip, and she had a rip in her shirt, but also $107 in her sock. And Carlee stated that she was kidnapped by a man who emerged from the trees near where she reported the child to be, off the interstate there. And she described this man as having orange hair with a bald spot. She claims she screamed, but he took her over a fence and into a car. And the next thing she remembers is being in the back of an 18-wheeler truck.
Couple of things that stood out to me right when this information came to light is... And we talked about this yesterday off the air, and I'm not making a joke here. I first thought of a clown when the person was described as having orange hair. Not saying this is a red-haired like a redhead, not saying that this person just had he was balding. It was orange hair with a bald spot, and that just instantly made me think of a clown. And again, I'm not trying to be funny, but that's just the visual that came to me, which made the story even more creepy. Unintentionally, probably. It's just the way my brain put it together. The other thing was, right. I'm not sure how one would identify being in the back of an 18-wheeler truck without knowing that they were put in the back of an 18-wheeler truck, other than you're looking at a long trailer, I guess, right?
Yeah, and maybe it's moving.
And assuming.
Yeah, or you can hear the interstate or the wheels or something. I don't know. And then Carlee claims to also have heard a woman's voice and a child crying as she was in the back of this truck. And then she said she escaped from the truck on foot. Unclear if the truck was moving at this point, I guess not, but that she was apparently run down and captured again. And then she said this time she was blindfolded, not tied at the wrists, because she claimed her abductors didn't want her to have marks on her wrists. And then she says she was taken to a house where she was forced to get undressed. And Carlee stated that she thinks they took photos of her, but she does not recall being sexually assaulted.
I mean, there's a ton of red flags here. And it's truly unfortunate that there are so many red flags, and we have to be talking about somebody who probably faked their abduction. I don't understand why somebody who's abducting somebody in a potentially very violent manner by picking her up and carrying her, and she had a rip, like her shirt was ripped, she had a, damage on her lip, but they didn't want her wrists to have any marks on it from being tied up. Like, just don't tie it tight if you don't want any marks. It's just you're fine with other damage on her body except for the wrists. Is very very strange to me.
Yeah, very strange. And when Carlee woke up the next day, she claimed that a female was feeding her crackers and playing with her hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then as the abductors tried to move Carlee back into a vehicle, she was able to escape again on foot. And this time she ran through the woods and ended up emerging from the woods near her house. And that's when she allegedly walked home.
Did you happen to find any information on how she made these escapes?
No, this was just her report, her account that she told investigators. Yeah. Well, people started believing it, though. I know it sounds kind of wild, but her boyfriend, Tamar Latrell Simmons, said on Facebook that Carlee was, quote, fighting for her life for 48 hours, end quote, after she allegedly fended off at least one abductor.
And, of course, with the nature of how the internet can speculate, there was wild speculation about this abduction, how she was abducted, trafficked. Like, Carlee was a victim of human trafficking, and the toddler was used as bait. I don't know, is it called critical thinking when you're looking at something like this and you have to say, okay, if someone's going to use a child as bait to traffic another human being, how much more difficult is it to use a child as bait on an interstate as opposed to a semi-secluded back road?
I would say it's much more wild because there's a better chance for surveillance video, as we saw, and there's multiple people passing by. Yeah, they're going fast. And, I'm sure not everybody has the opportunity to pull over because some people are in the left lanes. But if this call had been made from like a dark road, you wouldn't have the surveillance video, and the situation is just much different.
Yeah, but you'd still have the story. You'd still have the child. You still have someone coming out of the woods. You still have someone coming up in a car taking you to an 18-wheeler. Then you're on the interstate. If you needed to have the interstate as part of your story, it's just the abduction wouldn't have happened on the interstate.
Yeah, but it still doesn't work with the toddler being used as bait. And this is part of the story that kind of gets me a little worked up because I feel like everyone was talking about trafficking and human trafficking. But really, when you break this down, like, if it was true that there was a toddler being used as bait, that abductor wouldn't have known who would have stopped. It could have been a trucker who stopped, or it could have been someone with a gun, or it
could have been a psychopath.
Right, exactly. Like there's no telling that someone maybe more abductable would have been the one to pull over and try to help.
Yeah. You could have lured a cop, male or female. A police officer could have just happened to have been driving by, either on duty or off duty.
Yeah, and not to mention the danger that this, you'd put the toddler in if that was true. So yeah, huge red flags in her story. So much of it just doesn't make sense.
And this is why it was so perplexing at the top of the episode, just saying not sure how to cover it, because we're covering a story about somebody who probably faked their own disappearance, and that is just so frustrating and tragic because this is going to have a lasting effect, especially on Black people who don't get the coverage in the first place. And we know this, and we hear about it in the news all the time, and that will be used. This story will be used as an example, which is completely irrational, but it just has more potential now to be used in a negative manner. And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. One part of this story that made things a bit more confusing maybe was that the people close to Carlee really believed her story, and that included her boyfriend and her parents, Talitha and Carlos Russell. They spoke to NBC News, and they were on the Today Show. And we're going to play a clip here where her parents kind of double down on Carlee's abduction.
Carlee has given detectives her statement so that they can continue to pursue her abductor.
Do you believe that there's an abductor still out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you believe she was fighting for her life?
Oh, she definitely fought for her life. There were moments when she physically had to fight for her life, and there were moments when she had to mentally fight for her life.
Now, I have to hand it to the parents, regardless of any sort of involvement or conspiracy, just on the top here, I have to hand it to them for putting themselves out there and supporting their child. And I really, really hope that it doesn't come to pass that they had something to do with this if more details come out about any sort of hoax. Now, all of that being said, they want to believe their child, and they want to believe it so much that they put themselves out to the national media. They must know the potential ramifications of doing this.
Yeah, it is heartwarming in a way to see them have their daughters back that strongly. And the next day, the Hoover, Alabama police had a press conference. This was Wednesday, July 19th, 2023. There's a link to the entire press conference in the show notes, where Hoover Police Chief and snappy dresser, Nick Durzis, did most of the speaking. He was wearing that bright pink or purple suit jacket. And we're going to play some clips from the press conference here and kind of take some of this point by point.
Let me say up front, this investigation is not over. We're still working this case, and we'll be working this case until we uncover every piece of evidence that helps us account for the 49 hours that Carlee Russell was missing. However, through the public interest, and in some cases, public fear that this story has generated, we owe it to our citizens to tell them the facts that we have uncovered. So I will give you the facts that we know today. On July 13th, at approximately 8:20 p.m., Carlee left work from a business at the Summit. Surveillance video from her place of employment shows Carlee concealed a dark-colored bathrobe, a roll of toilet paper, and other items belonging to the business prior to her departure. She ordered food from Tzatziki's at the Colonnade and traveled there. She then traveled to Target on 280, where she purchased some granola bars and Cheez-Its. From there, she remained in the parking lot at that shopping center until 9:21 p.m. when she drove to I-459. Carlee communicated on her cell phone with individuals known to her while on her path of travel, up to the point of calling 911 at 9:34 p.m. Carlee called a relative after speaking with the 911 operator. She went missing during that conversation sometime after 9:36 p.m.
Now, we said repeatedly that Chief Durzis gave a really good press conference and was detailed with everything. What are some of the details that he brought up during this that stood out to you, Tim?
Well, one of my first takeaways was that Carlee apparently, I guess, stole a dark-colored bathrobe and a roll of toilet paper and some other items belonging to the business that she worked at, so her work, prior to leaving work. So that is interesting to me. I guess it could be a sign of like some premeditation, or could be a sign of maybe just some mental instability. But she concealed it, he made a point to say. So that makes me lean more towards the premeditation.
Yeah, so it wasn't like an act of desperation where she's grabbing things, running out, stuffing them into her jacket and running outside. This was premeditated because it seems specific what she was taking and deliberately concealed, as he mentioned. So yeah, good takeaway.
Now Nick Durzis goes into the search, and I think this is kind of an important part because he mentions that Hoover police deployed all available assets from the point and they started searching for Carlee. And this is like a 2-day search. So additional resources were also called in. The sheriff's office, Jefferson County Sheriff Department, helped out, and the FBI did as well as private citizens who started their own search parties.
Did you mention the Secret Service?
I did not.
Hoover police deployed all available assets from the point in the search for Carlee. Additional resources were called in to include our own drone unit, crime scene investigators. Numerous detectives responded to the scene. Throughout the day Friday, officers from surrounding local and federal agencies assisted Hoover police in the search for Carlee Russell. Officers returned to the scene on 459 to conduct a thorough line search for evidence. K-9 teams from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department responded to check for any sign of Carlee, the child that she claimed to see, and anything else that could be considered evidence in this case. Those searches all turned up empty. Private citizens, including search parties organized by our family, friends, began looking everywhere that they could to find any trace. These searches took place throughout the day Friday and again on Saturday, yielding nothing. At 10:44 p.m. on July 15th, the Hoover 911 center receives a call from Carlee's residence stating that she returned home on foot. In subsequent investigations, detectives obtained surveillance footage of Carlee walking down the sidewalk alone prior to arrival at her residence. She was conscious and speaking with paramedics when she was transported to UAB. Detectives were able to obtain a brief statement from her prior to being treated and released.
I also thought it was interesting hearing that detectives obtained different surveillance footage of Carlee walking down the sidewalk alone prior to arriving at her residence. I don't think that's been released yet, but boy, I feel like that would tell you a lot about her state of mind and the urgency in which she was heading home, I mean, if she had really just escaped her captors at that point, you would think she would just be like running, but I don't know.
Running and maybe even like out of sight, like in backyards or trying to evade something. But yeah, if it is what you described, her walking on the sidewalk, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Detectives noted that Carlee had a small injury to her lip, and she claimed that her head was hurting. She also had a tear in her shirt. Detectives also noted that she had $107 cash in her right sock.
What did you make of the injuries on her body and the condition that she was discovered in?
Yeah, I think that was interesting. She had a tear in her shirt. She had a small injury to her lip, but she had $107 in cash in her sock. So that was interesting. I mean, she left her purse in her car or near her car, but apparently took the cash with her for something if she needed it. The small injury to her lip, I mean, she could have tripped. She could have hit herself. I don't know. A rip in her shirt, that sounds like a small tear. So definitely does not sound like someone who was just abducted.
Also, her claim was that she was forced to undress, and then pictures were likely taken of her, at least that's what she assumed was happening, while she was blindfolded. I guess they didn't check her socks, or they let her leave her socks on when she was forced to be undressed. If they had, I guess they didn't, if they saw the money, didn't have any use for the money because they didn't take the money from her.
Yeah, I mean, that part I feel like makes no sense whatsoever.
It's hard. It's difficult to piece that together and have it make sense.
Detectives continue analyzing data from Carlee's cell phone that was left behind at the scene. We enlisted the help of the United States Secret Service in conducting this analysis. Part of what data included several internet searches in the days leading up to their disappearance that I think are very relevant to this case. On July 11th at 7:30 a.m., the term, "Do you have to pay for an Amber Alert?" was searched. On July 13th at 1:03 a.m., the day of her disappearance, the term, "How to take money from a register without being caught," was searched. On July 13th at 2:13 a.m., The day of her disappearance, the term Birmingham bus station was searched. On July 13th, 2:35 a.m., a search for a one-way bus ticket from Birmingham to Nashville was conducted with a departure date of July 13th. On July 13th at 12:10 p.m., a search for the movie Taken, a film about abduction, was conducted. There were 2 searches related to Amber Alerts on a computer at Carlee's place of employment, including one regarding the maximum age of an Amber Alert. There were other searches on Carlee's phone that appeared to shed some light on her mindset, but out of respect for her privacy, we will not be releasing the content of those searches at this time.
And the authorities did a search on Carlee's browser history, and I'm curious what your takeaway or takeaways are for this.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was really interesting, and again, kind of goes to her headspace. And I would use that word premeditation again, because she searched, you have to pay for an Amber Alert. So I guess she wanted to know how an Amber Alert gets created. On the day of her disappearance at 1 a.m., she searched how to take money from a cash register or from a register without being caught, and a one-way ticket from Birmingham to Nashville. And then she searched for the movie Taken, which Nick Durzis mentioned is about abduction.
And he mentioned that movie twice, I think. He said that right there is very odd to him, and it's very odd as well. That's one of my takeaways, is that this could be theorized as a pretty convincing setup, if that's the defense that Carlee wants to approach, because it is pieced together exactly like you would piece it together if you were trying to pull off an abduction hoax. Like, exactly. Even with the movie Taken, which is about abduction and trafficking, either it's the sloppiest hoax ever or this is a setup. We need to make it look like she has faked her abduction, so we're going to search this and we're going to search Amber Alerts, and it all is exactly in line with her story. We're going to make it look like she's ready to steal some cash, maybe plant some money in her sock.
Data from Carlee's phone, including her Life 360 app, shows that she traveled approximately 600 yards in her vehicle while she was on the phone with 911, stating that she was following a child. 600 yards. That is 6 football fields straight. 600 yards. Which tells me that I've had kids, and I'm sure a lot of people here have, and it's very, very, again, she said it, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen, because I've always been one of these guys, never say never, but 6 football fields. I like athletics, I like football. 6 football fields. To think that a toddler, barefoot, that could be 3 or 4 years old, is going to travel 6 football fields without getting in the roadway, without crying, without any just moving down, it's just very hard for me to understand.
One of the interesting things that the police chief, the Hoover police chief, Nick Durzis, says is that he's got kids, and then he references the people there, and he makes a note of, like, this child was 600 yards away, and he really emphasizes 6 football fields. He was sort of struggling his way through. I just have never known a child that old to not wander anywhere other than in a straight line. I mean, he didn't say those words, but he said the fact that child could walk that far without going into the road or without going one way or another in this line was interesting to me, because it's a rare thing to see a police chief getting, I don't know, kind of personal with that, like citing a personal example and then backing off a little bit, because you could tell he was trying to be very measured with his words.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, I have kids too, and I think what he was really getting at was how Carlee was cruising in the breakdown lane, and she said that she saw this toddler and sort of suggested that the toddler was walking those feet or those yards as well as she was driving, and she was going too fast for the speed of a kid. And Durzis is right. Like, a kid isn't going to be able to walk 600 yards in a straight line, but also just not in those 3 minutes. Like, that's not even close.
Without any other car pulling over.
Any idea about the number of manpower hours or the expense of the drones and all the rest of the search that might cost the city and the state and the federal government?
Yeah, we haven't had time to consider that, but it's again, these detectives that are here, this is just a small group of people that have been associated with this case. We have put every available resource that we have on this case because we wanted to make sure that we found out everything. We wanted to get her home, and we have. From the FBI side, several agents helping us interview. I mean, as you well know, in a case like this, especially when it goes national, we got hundreds and hundreds of calls. And when you get those calls, some of them may just be outlandish, but you got to follow up on them because you never know that you may get that one tidbit. And I'd also say too that we had a great cooperation with the family. The family received hundreds and hundreds of tips, and every time they got a tip, they sent it to us.
And I get that the reporters have to ask questions, but I was a little rubbed the wrong way when the reporter wanted Durzis to tell the public how much cost had gone into this. He rightfully deflected the question because you could see where that reporter was going. All of this money going into this, all of these resources, all of it for a hoax. And he deflected it. He was like, we're not at that point. So, he moved on to the next question. I was a little miffed that the reporter had to go and felt the need to go in that direction at that point.
Well, I think our detectives have talked to the parents, and we're ready to talk as soon as she's ready. So, she called right now. We're ready.
One thing that I had noted was, aside from the act itself and the abduction itself and any circumstances around it, he kind of went out of his way a couple of times to say that when she's ready to talk, we're here for her. And out of respect to her and her family, we want to wait for her to be ready. And he kind of kept putting it back on her and, to a certain degree, her family. That once they're ready, once they've healed, once they've reached a point in their process, we're here. And I thought it was really impressive when he said, if she calls right now, we'll talk to her right now. Which was, again, like so personal that I feel like he wanted to know that if she was watching, he was talking directly to her.
And so some more fallout. Carlee was fired from her work, and her coworkers are reportedly pretty upset with her. And this is from the New York Post. They spoke with Woodhouse owner Stuart Rome, who said it was really devastating for them, thinking a coworker was abducted. The following day, Saturday, it was the busiest day of the week, and they had to plug along and work, and in the off times, pass out flyers and other things. As the information came out that there was some questionable things, we've been a little pissed off, mainly because so many people took so much time out to search. And he mentions possible damage to his business because they got a slew of negative comments and reviews. And so Rome goes on. He says, basically, we've spent the last day battling to get things deleted. Comments. I've had to shut down my comments section on Instagram and Facebook, which hurts because we do a lot of marketing there. We're just trying to keep the doors open.
Man, I mean, this is something that was just done without any thought about repercussions beyond one individual, that this could affect businesses, other families. What a tragic story that doesn't have a tragedy per se. You know what I mean? It doesn't have any. Before we started this, we were like, well, I guess it's a good story in the sense that no one's injured and no one's dead. It seems like there was no child that was harmed. It just seems like the main damage here is just a lot of public perception and a lot of secondary residual impacts that are going to need to be cleaned up. Yeah,
definitely. And this isn't the last of the story that we're going to hear. And again, we're recording this on Tuesday, July 25th. This is being released on July 27th, 2023. And we may end up doing a follow-up at some point because it's hard for me to believe that more information isn't going to come out about this case.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. And there was a great article written by a woman named C.T. Jones of Rolling Stone, and it's called Carlee Russell Was Missing for 2 Days. Her case is already a conspiracy theory breeding ground. This is one of the first articles that I saw about Carlee's case that really kind of made me want to cover it. And CT makes a lot of great points, basically stating how folks don't study trafficking and don't really know what it actually is. And of course, child sex trafficking has been heavily politicized here in the United States. And of course, it is a real problem, but the article goes on to make the point that most trafficking isn't done by strangers. And oftentimes it's perpetuated by people who are trusted to the victim. And they'll use methods of control to slowly draw people away from their lives and into drugs, danger, and in a position where they feel like they can't escape.
Yeah, and just reading that in that article, again, you're right, it's a great article, but that is so reminiscent of the numerous people that we talk about on this show, where we hear that they were one thing before they met this one person, and it's so subtle and so gradual, and before you know it, that person's gone. And it's just textbook. Just swap out some names and dates, and you basically have the same blueprint for abduction and trafficking. And Carlee's story is exactly the opposite of the ones that we've talked about and what this article is referencing. There's never sudden bait. There's never a violent abduction for the most part. It's very gradual, and it is violent, but it's like a, again, I'll use the word gradual. It's a gradual, subtle violence.
Yeah, I think so. For the most part, I wonder. I'm reminded of Kaya Taylor's case.
Yep.
Whose car was also left on the side of the road, and it is believed that she was trafficked. Mm-hmm. So that one is interesting in that, you know, maybe there was some kind of altercation by her car. Obviously, it's unclear, and we're talking about Carlee Russell's case. But that's a case where trafficking likely did occur, and it was her boyfriend. You know, it was the man she was with for a while who was taking steps to sort of get Kaya into a position where she couldn't get out of.
Right.
So yeah, again, much different situation. Yes, the car was both found at the side of the road, but I mean, maybe Carlee was influenced by Kaya's case, you know, for all we know.
Or any of the number of cases where the cars are found on the side of the road.
Sure.
She has plenty to choose from, and that's a great comparison because it shows that subtle difference, right? The car is the one consistent factor between Carlee's case and Kaya. The car on the side of the road in a state where you would think that someone was abducted, but the circumstances leading up to it are entirely different. You mentioned the boyfriend. That was that slow, gradual grooming, and then that abduction, and the car is left in that state. There's no child bait. There was no call. There was no emergency call, right? 911 call.
No, I don't think so. There were threats, though, that Kaya had gotten.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I think that's kind of what we're talking about with there being a pretty big difference. And then just yesterday, on Monday, July 24th, 2023, Carlee's lawyer released a statement, and we're going to read it here. My client has given me permission to make the following statement on her behalf. There was no kidnapping on Thursday, July 13th, 2023. My client did not see a baby on the side of the road. My client did not leave the Hoover area when she was identified as a missing person. My client did not have help in this incident. That this was a single act done by herself. My client was not with anyone or any hotel with anyone from the time she was missing. My client apologizes for her actions to this community, the volunteers who were searching for her, to the Hoover Police Department and other agencies, as well as to her friends and family. We ask for your prayers for Carlee as she addresses her issues and attempts to move forward, understanding that she made a mistake in this matter. Carlee again asks for your forgiveness and prayers. End of statement.
It's a good statement. It's unfortunate, but it's a good statement from the lawyer.
Yeah, it seems like they're really trying to apologize before any charges or potential charges are filed, but that kind of seems like where it's heading to me.
I can't disagree with you, just given the circumstances around Sherry Papini and how she disappeared in 2016. It came to light that she had faked her disappearance to collect disability benefits, I guess, from Social Security, and she was, I believe, sentenced to 18 months in prison.
Yeah, Sherry Papini's story comes to mind when talking about Carlee Russell, of course, because Sherry Papini was charged with lying to authorities in her case, and she also ended up stealing and really defrauding the California Victim Compensation Board out of tens of thousands of dollars. So kind of a wild case there. But I mean, Carlee Russell's, like, the only comparison I feel like we have is Sherry Papini, off the top of my head at least. I think this probably happens more often than we know, but this one just started this media firestorm because of really the 911 call. The way Carlee set it up is, like, I feel like her worst enemy here.
Really is. And I'm wondering, like, there was so many other ways to go about doing this that she could have gone that wouldn't have drawn so much attention, but enough attention. Like, it didn't have to be on the interstate, and it didn't have to be a baby. She didn't have to say they didn't tie my wrist together because they didn't want marks on it. She didn't have to look up Taken on her computer, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder, though, if all of these mistakes leading up to her admission of it being a hoax is actually a good thing. I would like it to be a good thing, that she didn't actually get away with a fake abduction that for years everyone thought was true. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
that would be terrible if you found out after all of this media attention 20 years later that it was a hoax, and a lot of effort had been put into this. So I'm wondering if we can get a little silver lining because of how hastily her plan was put into effect.
Carlee's boyfriend, Tomar, released a statement as well on social media, and he says, Carlee's actions created hurt, confusion, and dishonesty. He goes on, I was made aware of the false narrative after coming to the defense of my ex, Carlee Russell. Myself and my family's nature was to react in love and genuine concern. We are disgusted from the outcome of this entire situation. I strongly feel exactly like you all, blindsided with Carlee's actions. This is still an ongoing investigation, but with all of the recent information and her confession, now we gain closure with this situation. Thank you to all my friends and families in the nation for support through this. I also want to send prayers and thanks. I feel like the word closure is maybe misused here. I don't think that this is like case closed quite yet.
I would have to agree that we are quite a distance away from it being case closed. And I truly do hope that Durzis was genuine when he said that Carlee's case will not have a negative impact on any other missing persons investigation moving forward. He made it very clear that they would utilize their resources if this were to happen again to another individual. And I, again, hope that this is something that does not have a negative impact.
I'd respond to say that we investigate every crime to the fullest, just like we have this one.
Yeah, definitely. And to close out here, just want to go over some potential charges that Carlee could face. And this is from AL.com. She could potentially be charged with false reporting to law enforcement authorities or falsely reporting an incident.
And it continues by saying, under state law, one is guilty of the Class A misdemeanor of false reporting to law enforcement authorities if he or she, quote, knowingly makes a false report or causes the transmission of a false report to law enforcement authorities of a crime.
And under another section of Alabama law, a person commits the crime of falsely reporting an incident if, quote, he or she initiates or circulates a false report or warning of an alleged occurrence, end quote. And falsely reporting an incident is also a Class A misdemeanor. Class A misdemeanors are punishable by not more than 1 year in county jail or a year of labor in the county. So not huge charges. It doesn't sound like, she's not going to be sent up, up the river or something like that, and I would have to imagine there is some leniency, sort of getting ahead of that with the statement from the lawyer and really apologizing. I feel like that could go a little bit of a ways. I think that helps.
I agree. I think, again, I said when the lawyer's statement was read, it was a smart statement by the lawyer getting ahead of any inevitable ramifications for this.
Yeah, and still so many questions remain. Like, where was Carlee during that 48 or 49 hours? I'm really curious to know. I'm sure at some point that'll come out.
And other than Carlee's lawyer statement and Carlee's parents' statements, not much is known about Carlee's mental health. So at the close of this episode, because we don't know exactly where she was at on that spectrum, we just want to make sure everyone knows that if you are struggling with any sort of mental health, please call the mental health hotline at 1-866-903-3787.
And we wish Carlee the best. Honestly, we hope she continues her training and becomes a nurse and really can put this incident behind her.